Trump wants to go back to the situation where he's a better friend of Israel than Biden or Kamala Harris. But I think Kamala Harris, despite what I was saying earlier, will still want to be perceived as very much a friend of Israel, but an honest friend.
Welcome to you, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure, John.
As always. Sarah, look, so you were listening to Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem there. We've been talking about anticipating that he would be saying a very firm no to the idea of a ceasefire deal, no to giving ground to Joe Biden as part of those ceasefire negotiations. How's that going to go down in Washington? One assumes not at all well, even though they may not be surprised.
Not at all well, no. Joe Biden said very firmly today that he didn't think that Netanyahu was doing enough to get a deal. He was asked that direct question and he replied with one word. Was Netanyahu doing enough? He said no. And although he also said hope springs eternal, he said he was working on a final deal. And, one's wondering what a final deal means because there have been signs coming from the US government that it's a sort of almost put up or shut up time now, that the US really wants a ceasefire and it has to get some sort of agreement on this or something will change. What we don't know is what that something is. But I don't think that Joe Biden is in the mood to be endlessly strung along on this basis.
I mean, we've heard it reported as being the view in DC that this was a take it or leave it point for Netanyahu. But what does that even mean? I mean, he's not going to take it. What's the other option? Just to carry on hoping, I suppose, because I don't think you're going to see America take further. Are you, Sarah, see further action by way of sealing off the supply of arms to Israel?
I don't think you'll see that. I mean, that is ultimately a threat that America can make, but it's one that obviously Joe Biden is incredibly reluctant to do. I think he is actually privately furious because he was incredibly supportive of Israel on and after October the 7th, and he has continued to be Israel's best friend. And but obviously, it's very difficult in the circumstances. You've seen the huge protests even amongst Israelis at Netanyahu's conduct of the war and failure to arrange a ceasefire. And America has tried again and again. We don't know what a final deal means. Maybe it doesn't mean stopping arms, but it does mean, well, we're going to stop playing honest broker here. We've done everything we can.
Yes.
And we'll support you up to a point, but no further, and maybe restrict some aspects, but certainly not try to sort of cajole Egypt and Qatar and other players into, getting this deal. That this is Netanyahu's crisis and he's got to cope with it. It is hurting Joe Biden and his would-be successor, Kamala Harris, politically, particularly in swing states like Michigan, where there's a big Muslim voting contingent, and also with progressives. And of course, Donald Trump is, free to just sound off about how this wouldn't be happening if he was president, which seems to be his answer to all foreign policy crises. So it is damaging. I mean, Kamala Harris was in the Situation Room today with Joe Biden, the only woman in the room, incidentally, and, trying to show that she herself has foreign policy expertise and has a seat at the table of these discussions. But they're not going anywhere. That's the problem.
Yeah, looks like a complete deadlock. Theo is with me. Kate is with us. We're all interested in the American side of this story. Theo.
I was just going to ask her, is there a discernible shift that you would expect were Kamala Harris to win the presidential election from Biden to Harris, and the way she approaches this conflict and how she would deal with Netanyahu?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a very delicate one. I do think there would be a difference, and to some extent, what Joe Biden regards as Netanyahu's intransigence over a ceasefire is going to ease her path should she decide to take a stronger line, if she is elected president, of course, which we don't know yet. I think she has always been the front person for a more humanitarian solution. She's been the one arguing most for a ceasefire, for condemning the killing of so many Gazan civilians. And so she is thought to be more in favor, sort of, I guess, wanting a deal more badly and tougher on Israel than Joe Biden. And if America, and certainly she feels that Joe Biden has attempted everything and has got nowhere, that gives her permission to be tougher on Israel when she's president.
Yeah, she doesn't carry the same baggage, Sarah, does she, as Joe Biden when it comes to the Israel relationship. When Netanyahu was in Washington just a few weeks ago, talking about Joe Biden as being the Irish American Catholic Zionist, and there's a closer link between the skeptics and Kamala Harris on her side of the aisle, but of course on the Republican side they're keen to make the divide, if you like, as wide as possible. Kate McCann listening in too. Hello, Kate.
Hi, John. Yes, Sarah, I suppose I'm interested. We were talking about before about this question of why the UK's influence in this particular conflict is waned, if it was ever really there. What do you think's going on the US side? I mean, has power completely shifted away from the US and the UK now?
Well, I think in the end, Bibi Netanyahu has always been very much his own man. There's some criticism or questions, should I say, going on here as to whether or not Donald Trump has encouraged Netanyahu to be intransigent on the basis that, wait until I'm president, might be the message from Trump to Netanyahu. Some critics of Trump are trying to suggest that he bears a share of the responsibility for the hostages' death, but I think that's pretty obviously a step too far. But we don't know what private conversations Donald Trump has been having with Netanyahu. They used to get on very well, less well after Netanyahu recognized Joe Biden as the legitimate president of the United States back in 2020. But I think Trump wants to go back to the situation where he's a better friend of Israel than Biden or Kamala Harris. But I think Kamala Harris, despite what I was saying earlier, will still want to be perceived as very much a friend of Israel, but an honest friend.
Sarah, is anyone claiming in the media or elsewhere, claiming to have any evidence of Donald Trump encouraging Benjamin Netanyahu to be more intransigent, or is that just part of the chatter you might expect to be in the air at a moment like this?
That's part of the evidence-free chatter.
Yeah.
It is true that Trump and Netanyahu have talked, so it's like, well, what do they talk about? Yeah. This is so the suspicion is there, but honestly, I could not back that up at all.
No,
as you know very well, John, that in American election campaigns, all kinds of allegations are made by all sides, often very much evidence-free, and yet they kind of enter the discourse.
They do. They do.
I wouldn't like to state that this was in any way a fact.
In any event, Sarah, it's lovely to have you with us. Thank you for your take from your side of the pond. That's Sarah Baxter there.